Hey, some ways to engage with this week's episode, Living Your Magic with Kristell Court. And this would be things that you would do following the episode, but you can even think about them as you're listening to the episode. Try creating your own self-care menu. Have different categories such as physical, mental, emotional, soulful, etc. And list a few things under each category that nourishes you. When the morning comes or the night comes, whenever you've laid these options out for yourself, look at those options and do whatever you need for yourself in that moment, that day, that week. And this is really going to enable you to meet yourself where you are with your self-care. We hope you find this helpful. Take care and enjoy our episode this week with Kristell Court.
Prioritizing self-care in your life. You literally have a blog called Self-Care and Emotional Exhaustion on your website, literally addressing this. So talk to me about your journey with self-care.
Oh, well, one thing I really do to prioritize my own self-care, I love a slow morning. I don't generally see clients before 9:30. I have a routine that I call morning magic. I get to decide what goes into that container. Usually it involves my journal that I follow this particular joy journal method, actually, by my friend Jillian. And sometimes there's coffee. If I'm fasting, there's tea. So that's one thing that I do on non-negotiably every day.
Yeah.
I actually keep a self-care menu in the front cover of my planner.
So I love that.
Yeah, because often when we're in the thick of it, we're like, what do I need right now?
Yeah.
Right? So I just have this go-to list. I'm a very bad artist, but there's little drawings of what the thing is. So if it's anything from having a bath with some nice salts or whatever, reading a book, sit down with the dog, go for a walk, all of those things that fall into that bucket for me.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's self-care is way more than massages and manicures, but I even have paint your nails or file your nails because it's that singular focus.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Repetitive action, caring for yourself thing. I have things like that scheduled regularly, like massages. Mm-hmm. I'm very fortunate to have a cohort of coaches from my training program that I meet with regularly. Engaging with things like hobbies, those would be on that self-care menu. I like to knit, to do something with your hands, to go bake something or be in the kitchen, put on some music, really raise the vibe. And really true to my human design energy type, I do have that really helps me get out of my head and into my body and make a quick decision on what I need for health, for my self-care, for myself in that moment. So that's why I have that little menu as kind of at a glance.
Mm-hmm. I love that because I love the word self-care menu. One, it's a reminder that there's multiple ways that we can show up and nourish ourselves and gives ourselves what we need. And sometimes when we're in spaces where we're just we need that jarring, that reminder in one space of oh yeah, that sounds refreshing to me right now. That sounds like it would fill my cup right now. That sounds like that's going to refill my energy level. Or even calm my energy if I'm feeling frantic, these kinds of things. Because you talk a lot about energies, and it's so important that it impacts how we show up in a room, in a space, all the things. So I love that menu piece.
Yeah, I think it's also really important to consider that self-care isn't just bodily care. It can also be mental and our spiritual and our soul. It can also be our finances, right? Having things in order. Saving for a big thing to look forward to, whether that's a trip or a concert that you have on your calendar. So you have the resources. You are a well-resourced person to do the things you want to do, right? So looking at it as there's various aspects to it. This isn't just caring for your body. This isn't a spa day per se. Although those things count too.
Yeah. They have a place they fit in, but it's not the whole story. I love that. It's a full-bodied experience. And I love the example you use of that travel or that concert, those things that fill you in a different way. For me, travel is one of my values. It literally shows up as a value for me. So if I know I have a trip coming or we're planning a trip, that really has a great impact on my emotional and mental health of knowing that's coming. But also it's important that I feel resourced to do it, because if I don't feel well resourced to do it, then I'm losing part of the joy of it, because I'm stressed about the resources that it will take to do this thing that is on my calendar that I want to do.
Yeah.
So
I think you hit the nail on the head there too with the word values. That knowing and articulating what you value then can make it easier for you to understand what you need.
Yes.
Because if you're a person who values, health and vitality, but you're eating crap and staying up too late and not moving your body, well, then those are all things that maybe would fall into self-care for you.
Yeah.
The person who values adventure or travel, those are things, right? So really being clear on what it is that we value, what really matters to us, and values shift over time.
They do.
Right?
And we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that, because that's a big part of this piece. And I'm so glad you brought that in, because it just shows how connected all of these talking points are today that we're going to talk about. Confidently setting boundaries. And this goes into our time, where we give ourselves, where we don't, all those things. The values piece comes in here. Again, the mental, emotional, physical, which we'll talk about in a minute, all comes into that, where we need to have those things in place, because they're for us. It's not a wall that's meant to keep other people or things out. It's for protecting our energy and what we're allowing in and where we're allowing ourselves to give.
Ooh, girl. Ooh, girl.
And it's hard. It's hard.
So the last almost year, I'm like, have you been in my therapy? But there is a tendency on my part and again, like, I'm a coach, I'm a highly aware, self-aware person. I do this work. I have a team of people that help me, support me with this, right? I recognize the privilege in that. I have a tendency, a habit perhaps formed over time, that my boundaries either look like that fortress wall, goes up real fast and real hard, or complete and total rebel, and everyone can get at me, right? So I'm really working with this metaphor of like a cell. Think back to science class as a kid, that cellular membrane that allows things to come and go as if they're allowed in. Totally. It's permeable. And at the core of said cell, there's like the atom or nucleus, whatever, that nucleus, right? Nothing gets right to the core. Not everything gets right to the core. What's allowed in the core. So I've been using, because coaches love metaphors, right? So that's a metaphor I've been using in my own life. And that's a great
metaphor that people can kind of see. And then, because so many times if people haven't had boundaries before, you need those metaphors to explain to them what an example of something in a healthy way would look like. My son-in-law and daughter use the word guidepost. I mean, but that thing, that permeable, that flexible, that room to move, allow things in, not, pace, but also not just open for business all the time to everything.
Totally. Yeah. So in my coaching sessions, I don't really follow that SMART goal method with my clients. I want to know what your North Star, for me, is the word. What's your North Star? And in articulating that, then what are your priorities? So for me, being very clear on what my priorities are. And when I'm presented with something that maybe bumps up against my boundary a little bit, think, what priority is this serving right now? And that is like a great opportunity for a reframe around that whole mental chatter that, oh my God, they want a piece of my time. Again, we have to think about our resources. This is not just money in the bank. This is our time. This is our energy. This is what we're saying no to makes room for more yes. So having things show up, I'll use an example from my own business and life. My whole Q1, I was like, the big goal is doing all the things I need to be ready to sit my exam for the International Coaches Federation, to finish off my training, tie that up with a pretty little bow. I'd put it off for long enough. So plot it, then go work back, plot out the time to study, plot out the time to, submit the demo call, all the things that I need to do in service of that goal. So if people are coming at me and saying, hey, we would really like you to participate in this. Would you be interested in that? Could you? And it just is like, that doesn't serve my Q1 goal. That sounds more like a Q3 thing. Can we chat in a couple of months?
Yeah.
So that's me being very clear on this is what I'm doing right now. And again, part of my human design energy type has to be very much what is lighting me up.
Yes. Yes.
So if my that boundary has to be, and that's one of my priorities, work that lights me up, very clearly articulated. If this isn't lighting me up, this is a no.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And it's just, and it's another reminder of, and our Valerie, from Inner Solace Therapy was on with me a couple seasons ago. And she says, you got to remember whatever it is you say yes to, you're saying no to something else. And you got to be okay with that. And that goes really well with that lights you up piece and paying attention to that. Because if we don't pay attention to that, we get drained and we start showing up not the way we want to be showing up. And sometimes I'm like, why am I feeling this way? Like going back to those values, going back to that North Star, because North Star value, that's all tightly connected. We all have something in us that aligns with that, but figuring out what that is, so many times we don't even know what that is. And that's really where I think your work comes in. And we'll get to that in a minute. But I want to talk about that emotional, mental, physical health connection. You talk about, like I said, you've got a blog on self-care and emotional exhaustion. You have a quote on your website that I absolutely love. The world needs more people who are living their magic. And all part of that is knowing where you are mentally, emotionally, physically, and the impacts on that when you don't tend to that. So talk to me about that. And then I want you within that, after you've talked to me, I want to hear your journey within that. But I also want you to explain the human design process to people so they can see those connect points.
Yeah. Well, so human design has been an excellent tool for me over the last 5 years to just really develop some self-awareness. What I often hear from clients once they have a bigger understanding of that human design and that level of awareness is they say, I feel like I just got a permission slip to be more of who I am.
Oh,
and I'm always like, from whom do we need this permission? From whom? Right?
Yeah.
So it just it removes all that self-talk, the negative, the shoulds, all that kind of stuff, that quagmire we get stuck in. And it just feels like curiosity and awareness and all these like much higher vibe things, right?
Right.
So beyond just working and playing with my own human design, I use it as a mom, I use it as a wife. It impacts and ripples out across I use it with entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
I have built myself a team of people in my life that could range anything from a therapist to a massage therapist, to my chiropractor, to my somatics coach, etc. Like I'll always say, I'm going to swear, I hope that's okay. It takes a village to keep this bitch out of the ditch. Me.
I love that so much. That is so good. And we can all relate to that. Yep. It does.
Yeah.
Like, is this that? And being okay with that. Like, women are so afraid to ask for help. Like, somehow it's some kind of a failure. No, it's that being able to do that empowers us.
Yeah. So this is again, like looking at my resource of time and how am I booking and handling all of these things? How are my priorities showing up in my calendar?
Yeah.
And in service of doing these things is serving my energy and therefore feeding the energy of the people that I'm interacting with.
Wow.
So yeah, really good. And so my work with human design, a lot of people who are working with human design, again, it's not mine. I didn't develop it. It belongs to somebody else.
Yeah.
Do it more like a reading, just like you would go for an astrology or a tarot or something, which is great. You get a lot of information.
Sure.
What I feel like is that I'm just throwing labels at people. You're a this energy type, you're a that. This is how you work when you're in alignment. This is how you're showing up when you're not in alignment, blah, blah, blah. I'm just vomiting all these words on them, and they kind of start to glaze over in about an hour.
Yeah.
And then I don't know what they do with it when they leave.
Right. And did they understand
Did they remember?
it? Yeah.
Or did they just hear another label about themselves? Like they now know they might be a generator, and they're also a Scorpio, and it's also Mercury retrograde. So the whole world is going to shit, like whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm very aware of like, I'm not going to label you. What I want to give you is a bunch of tools. So when in my work with clients, I have a package called Demystify Your Human Design. So the first session feels a lot like me giving you a lot of information about yourself.
Sure.
And then I want you to walk away with curiosity and see how this is showing up in your work, in your family life, in your body, how it feels, how you're interacting with people differently, how your self-talk has maybe shifted. And then you come back into the second session and you're like, whoa. Yeah, I've been out there in the world playing with this now, and I'm realizing this. Let's unpack it as in a more coaching way. Or they might be like, this was amazing. I want to know more. So we'll dig into the next few things, right? We can get into the next layer of it as we're talking about layers in this podcast, right? So really having that knowledge to care for ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, as a framework, human design has been really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted you to talk about it here. So talk to me about your own journey in getting to this space.
Yeah. So this wound up being like a pandemic project when the world shut down, and I'd heard about it before and was interested in it. A friend of mine had done her teacher training or guide training basically, and did my session as practicum kind of practice. And I was just like, how did you do this? I need to know more. Tell me more, all the things. So I basically followed her path with the training and did a couple extra other things on my own. The immediate impact was seen within my family unit, especially when we were in that lockdown environment.
Oh yeah. And we're all together all the time.
Yeah. And my kids I use my daughter. So she's the only projector in our household. That's one of the 5 energy types. The rest of us are manifesting generators. So 3 of us operate quite similarly, not exactly the same, but quite similarly. And then she's out there different than the rest of us. I could have told you that from the moment she was born. Yeah. But now I just have a different word for it, right?
Language for it.
Totally. So she, of course, like studying in your room or on online school, we're isolated, like everything was crazy. And so we'd go and knock on her door and be like, hey, Garth Brooks is doing a live concert. We're all going to like make some pizza tonight. And she's like, I'm fine all the time. I'm good. No, thanks. Whatever. But that just made us want to go and knock on her door more. So the interesting thing about a projector is that the more they hide away, the more interesting they are to the rest of the world. And what actually needs them, part of how they operate is that they need to be invited. They need to feel included. They need to know that they're going to make a difference to whatever the thing is. But part of that is that they have to like tinker and hone whatever their gift is. Their projectors are highly gifted people. And I really do believe that for this like next phase of human evolution, they're the guides for the tribe. They're the ones that take us there. Wow. A lot of the rest of us are in that like work mode, the hustle. Yeah. They're the heart. Yeah. They're the heart.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
So then once I knew she was a projector, she'd just use words like, I just need some projector time. And I'd be like, oh, she's fine. Like, she's not in any kind of mental health crisis. She's not suicidal. She's not depressed. She's not, whatever on the computer. Lord knows what they can get into, right? I just have a different understanding that there's 3 of us who operate differently. She knows now she's been invited. We've asked her to be included. She needs to go with the flow way more. And so part of being a projector means hopping into a project, going with the flow, kind of riding the rapids, but knowing that it's time to get out of the river.
Got it.
So she doesn't have to show up from beginning to end. She can show up in the middle and still make it a like beautifully gifted time.
Yeah. And what a wonderful tool, and really gives you some language and some just understanding of how they operate. Cause that's so much of figuring out how to raise your kids and showing up for them in the way that's going to be the most supportive to them. Also giving her license to be her authentic self. without, with understanding, with support, without judgment, without misunderstanding. So many times it's just misunderstanding of when you're wired differently, not knowing the questions they even ask or how you're supposed to show up. And so I would definitely fall into that. I would be, the more they say no, I'm like, now I'm worried. Is she okay? That's a very natural tendency for a parent to go. So having this language, also understanding what it is you need mentally, emotionally, physically, where a feeling in your body, and trusting that as an alert system that something might need to be adjusted somewhere. Or not. Maybe you're feeling jubilation, all those things as a guide, but having all that information. And then also I would say, as a leader, understanding your personnel, understanding your team, understanding you. What a powerful tool.
Yes. Yeah. One of my favorite things is actually doing human design for small teams.
Yeah.
Going into a business. Like I've done it for a couple and they'll be like, oh yeah, like now it makes sense. Or I didn't know that about you or whatever. And I mean, when I'm talking about energy types, that's just like the top line of human design.
Sure.
We can dig into like profile numbers and not self themes of gates and channels and planets. And like, it's endlessly fascinating and a ton of information, which again is why there's no way for me to cover it off effectively in an hour as like a meeting, right? So that's where we play with it. We experiment with it. You go out and use it in your real life. We integrate it.
Yeah.
So,
and you talk about that layers piece. I mean, and you've got a blog about the layers, and this is part of that layers piece of unfolding the layers of yourself, but understanding each other's layers too is so important in all kinds of relationships, and understanding it informs on how they communicate. It can inform people. Are they even in the right match from a job or a career standpoint, or within your team of like, I've got them working on this. They might be better suited here, or their time might be better suited here, or maybe these hours don't work for them. Maybe we need to give them a different kind of schedule. Oh, they need more structure. I mean, it's endless in terms of the information it gives you.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have many examples from clients, right?
No, I bet.
I can give you like the one team building one that was really fascinating to me was talking about a graphic designer had like a money channel or money gate in her chart. And so I'm telling the team this, like maybe you don't know this about her, but this is how this goes. And the accounting team was like, is that true? And like, do you like money? Is that like a thing? Because why would you think a graphic designer and artist?
Oh, no. I have a daughter that's a graphic designer. And exactly.
Yeah. Right. So you label somebody as an artist. So therefore they're not good with managing resources. Why would you?
Yeah.
Well, she's like, all I read, all I listen to, podcasts, audiobooks, whatever, are all on finance, money, savings, stock market. She's like, I'm fascinated with it. And so they started inviting her to their quarterly plan meetings as the accounting group.
Yeah.
Right. Because she might have a different perspective on how things work. Also, it lights her up. She's interested in it. So let's involve her.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
As a tool to better our employees, to engage them, to ongoing training, etc. Like, why not?
Absolutely. And it keeps her engaged in multiple ways, and seeing her as a full human and not just a human doing, but a human being. I mean, I think that's so much power in that too.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I love that you keep coming back to my blog too. I actually have a blog post titled Human Being, Not Human Doing, something along those lines. Because it's actually in my human design, I have a storyteller gate. And so for me, like writing and speaking and stuff, I'm like, this is all part of how I tell my story. Whereas the work I was doing before, I was an executive assistant working in other people's businesses. I was hiding. Right? I was supporting their story, not my story. So it's, again, like there's all kinds of little nuggets in there that all of a sudden feels like permission. Like, okay, I am a storyteller. I am going to prioritize writing every month.
Yeah. And those affirmations, it's a lot of times those things that maybe you sensed about yourself, but you felt like you didn't have anything to back it up. Like we're always looking for things to back it up or support it. And that really can give, and also language and understanding and how you introduce yourself, and even just knowing who you are as a person. And again, finding that North Star, getting in alignment with those things, and allowing yourself to draw and be filled, be fired up. Because how much more authentic can we show up as women, as humans, as people in the world, if we're feeling like we've got a fired up reason to get up every day? We're not just, this just changes everything, which really goes, nicely into how we can support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically. These are the kinds of tools that allow us to do that. And if people see you showing up lit up in a room, they're going to be like, I want what she had. Exactly. So talk to me about that living an apologetic journey and also supporting other women in doing so.
Well, I'm involved in the leadership of the local, I'm in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So the local circle of Women Belong. You and I met at a Women Belong meeting.
Yes, we did.
And one thing I've learned from the two founders, Dorothy and Kate, is just show up generously. Don't show up with like, what's in it for me, tit for tat. I give you this, you give me that. Show up generously. Show up as your full, whole, and complete self with an open and generous heart.
Yeah.
And be grateful for what comes of it.
Yeah.
There's so much magic there. And I think, over hundreds, if not thousands of years, women have been divided, like the witch wound, right?
Yes.
The not speaking up, the not talking to each other, the being controlled by the patriarchy, I don't want to say men, but structures that have been set up to support them and weaken us. That I really do feel like women are going through this great remembering.
Yeah, I love that. The Great Remembering. Yeah. That's such a cool title. That's so good.
Great Remembering. And I will also say, like, the opposite of remember is dismember. So think about what happens if somebody is dismembered, like head chopped off, right? Yeah. We are living separate. Our head and our body are dismembered. So we are remembering. And this is creating great change for the planet. Yeah. This is showing up in various ways of people trying to take back control.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where we're losing women's rights.
Well, and the people that have power are like all of a sudden afraid, instead of being fueled by what fires them up, they're being fueled by this power, and it's a false narrative. And it's not in that, but yeah, you're seeing a lot of responses right now as people are like, no, we don't need to live like this anymore. There's a better way. It's more authentic for all of us. But when people that have had power, and they don't even, I think, understand that it's the power that's holding them there. They're masking it as a lot of what happened to the old traditions and all those. These old traditions aren't serving everybody. They're serving some, and they're not. Yeah. So I think that, those responses are all in alignment with that, but people are rising up and saying, wait a minute. No. There's a better way.
Women who are working like you or like me, or like a lot of the women that I travel with in different circles, right, are showing up in their magic, speaking about what they do, gathering communities, creating circles, book clubs, like whatever that is. The more women gather, the more magic will happen, because we're also teaching the younger generation.
Yes.
To be divided, be together. Yeah. Right? Be connected.
And we were designed for that. We were designed to be in community and connect. I mean, that's what, and that's how we move needles and change experiences and narratives and stigmas. I mean, all those things are involved, but it involves all of us getting engaged and tapping into ourselves and finding that beauty and that North Star and that authenticity is so much. Yeah. So good.
And just plant your freak flag and let it fly. And the people will find you. Other people will find you. The other weirdos and whatever, they're all going to be like, hey, I want to talk about crystals. Hey, I want to talk about Reiki. Hey, I want to talk about whatever human design, insert modality here, right? Yeah. And so I am also seeing concurrently. So I'm in this show up generously.
Yeah.
But take no crap.
Yeah, exactly. And you can do both. You can do both. I think that's very important for people to understand that sometimes we put ourselves show up generous. No. You can still make a stand and be like, no. That's a boundary for me. Don't get to treat me that way. Talk to me that way. Whatever. Yeah.
So I am seeing a little bit of like, it's almost that duck and cover. That like hands in, holding, this is mine. This is my little pile of whatever. I'm protecting it with all my might. And again, I don't own human design. There could be 1,000 people in the city doing human design. It's not, I didn't develop it. I didn't invent it. It's not mine.
Yeah.
Right. But I am seeing this tendency. It's again, that reaction to what's happening. Like we're showing up generously, but there's still going to be the tendency, the reaction maybe to be like, no, I can't be generous with this. I need to protect this. This is my little, right?
Yeah.
Or people copying what other people are doing.
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like, right? So just remembering like what low energy feels like and what high energy feels like.
Yeah. Well, and just that scarcity mind, not believing that scarcity mindset too.
Yeah.
That's when we start hoarding things.
With fear and shame and guilt and all these, like, I call them bargain basement emotions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. As opposed to like joy and gratitude and all those like high
things that fill us up. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we're showing up fearfully, of course, we're going to duck and cover.
Yeah. 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 And I think it's so getting people to understand that it's fear, because so many times when you don't tap into that or don't understand that or know that, or you don't want to, I mean, people have to be open to this too. It gets a very defensive stance. And so that showing up generously is like, all right, when you're ready to talk about this, I can show up generously for you. But until then, I'm going to be mindful of my energy. And so I think I'm glad you brought that up of like, those coexist, those don't have to be, it's a both and, situation.
I mean, we aren't all going to show up every day, level 10, love and light. We can't.
Yeah.
No. We can't have you can't have the best day ever every day.
No. Well, you wouldn't know what the best day ever was if you didn't have any counter experiences to that.
Yeah. So recognizing that when you're showing up generously, there may be the feeling occasionally that you don't want to be generous. You want to protect, you want to guard, right? And other people are doing it too.
Yeah. Yeah. And getting back to that human piece, we're human and, and understanding that empathy piece as well within that. I think that develops that understanding really well. You hit on this earlier and this North Star piece and this values piece, but talk to me about your journey of it's coming back to your why, your values, your North Star, how that forms and everything you do.
Yeah. So again, like we've talked about, like really knowing your priorities, which are different than your values. Your priorities are usually fed by your values. So I can very clearly say to you, Melissa, my values are my little family. That's me, my husband, my children. That's it. My little family, work that lights me up, my well-being. And in that bucket is health, right? Physical, mental, and spiritual. Yeah. In no particular order.
Right.
So
right. Whatever the need is that day.
Yeah. So if I can clearly articulate, those are the three things that I prioritize. Everything else doesn't score as highly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then supplementary to that, you can articulate your values. And I already mentioned values shift over time. So we're recording this. It's springtime coming into summertime. It's a really beautiful time to reflect on our values because there's all this newness out here.
Yeah. Fresh life.
Totally. Yeah. So really just being like shedding those layers from winter. Like it's almost like getting rid of exfoliating some dead skin.
Yeah.
And like, what now matters to me? What are my values? Maybe like are there 5 to 7 that are really like that I want to focus on right now? Yeah. So really checking back in and seeing if things have changed for you. Yeah. I happen to be in the age and stage where my kids are just on the cusp of adulthood, right? They're 18 and almost 21. So a lot of what is feeding me right now is the feeling I want to feel free. I keep chasing freedom. Concurrently, there's peace, right? But I feel very much like that's an age and stage for my life, my kids,
Sure.
that I have this newfound freedom that they're, relatively self-sufficient. They can drive themselves places. They're, working in college and whatever. So I have this newfound freedom of time and whatever. Like, what am I going to do with it?
Yeah.
So recognizing what your North Star is, that freedom piece for me right now.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
What would freedom do? How does freedom feel? What does freedom look like? Because if you ask me what freedom looks like, it's going to look a hell of a lot different than other people in the world who are suffering right now.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because freedom is one of those words out there that's a very interesting, depending on, you just said it, where you are in the world, what your experience currently is. How does that manifest for you?
Yes.
I think that's and that also reminds you of the humanity piece again, of being mindful of the freedom you do have that others don't. So is that something that lights you up? Okay, one of the things I'm going to be really focused on and passionate about is I want others to experience the same types of freedoms that I'm able to experience in a way that's authentic to them. Understanding, so I think I like that you use that example. It's a great example. And also I like that seasonal piece of like, take a look at your values each. You pick out, you chose spring, maybe you do it in the fall as leaves are falling and you're going, whatever it is that works for you, taking a look and like, do these things still align? Because you also said priorities like, I got to get to work on time. The kids, I got to make sure your kids are older, but that the kids get to school. We've got to have a meal on the table by X amount of time. Those are priorities. And of what so I think sometimes priorities and values can work together in terms of how what your values are can inform what you prioritize. But there's also priorities, the things that just have to, on a daily, we've got to do that may or may not, coexist with the values. So I'm glad you separated them out, because I think we muddy that.
Totally. And I'll give you a real world example from our situation right now, right? We've got kids with varying schedules and demands on work, life, career, people, like all going every which way. Yeah. So my husband was really struggling with like, who's where, what time, all the stuff. And finally he just said, okay, on Sunday nights at 6:30, we have family dinner. Whoever can come, come. You guys are expected to be here. Bring a friend, bring whoever you're dating right now. My cousin just moved to the city. We'll, have him over, whatever. And my husband so graciously was like, I'm cooking. This isn't on mom. I will cook. So he cooks on Sundays. We sit down to family dinner. It might be one of the only times in a week that we actually can all sit and have like a family meal without, somebody coming in a little later or somebody having to go out again or whatever that looks like. But for him, that serves that this is my little family priority. Yeah. So we get to sit with each other. It's very like chill. If people have come, we often send them with leftovers for Monday lunch or whatever, right? Like this just is very much who we are. Yeah. And I guess that was the other thing I wanted to say. I love words. I'm a total word nerd.
Me too.
And I really do believe that words are a magic wand. I didn't make that up. I borrowed that from someone else. And I'll layer it even one more. That's why it's called spelling.
Yeah. Ooh.
Right? To spell.
Yeah.
So
that's good.
If my North Star is freedom, I can go on synonyms.com and I can type in freedom and I can look up like, what are some other words that mean freedom or represent freedom? And so is that ease? Is that flow? Is that whatever? Right. Yeah. So when I'm thinking about that Sunday dinner thing, it has this structure to it. I come to this all the time. Structure creates freedom. So having some structures in our life around the things we have to do, of course, there has to be a meal. We have to get the kids to school. We have to go to work, yada, 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 pay our bills. Yeah. That structure creates freedom.
Living out of your own expectations versus others. I feel like this can really give a formula for that. If people have struggled, and because when you're living out of your own out of others' expectations, at some point there's an angst point that hits with you. And so many times we ignore that angst point because, especially as women, we've been told you're being selfish. You're, or there's this map that we were given when we were 22 coming out of college or 18 coming out of high school, or whatever your story is. This was how this thing was going to go. And if you follow all these steps, then you too will experience supreme contentment, happiness, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, wait a minute. I never stopped to ask myself what I care about within this. And am I engaged in anything that is fueling my fire right now? And you, if you'll know it, it's just a matter of whether you choose to acknowledge it or not. And I feel like this human design piece is just, it gives you such a formula for tapping into that piece. But talk to me also as a woman and just throughout time, getting to this point of that expectations journey for you.
Yeah. So again, I'll rely on my human design energy type. Everyone of the 5 would have a different relationship with this, but my energy type has a really sticky relationship with duty and obligation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and generators would be similar, that we learn quite young that we have to be tired. We have to be doing things for other people to the detriment of ourselves. So we're tired, exhausted, etc.
Yeah.
In order for other people to be happy with us or love us or whatever, however that shows up. So we are rewarded for showing up exhausted. And I'll layer that even further. The just collectively, the more energy types, the most are generators and manifesting generators. So odds are when you're out there interacting with the world, that's the majority of people. Then there's kind of the outliers of manifestors and projectors, and then reflectors are extra super duper rare. Only ever met 2.
Wow.
Yeah. So really recognizing that even if what I just said to you and you're not a manifesting generator or a generator and you have that tricky relationship with duty and obligation, but you're a different energy type, you're interacting with those energy types probably most frequently, just on the level of probability, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're tapping into their duty and obligation, right? You're trying to keep up with an energy type that is not aligned for you. So for me, I really have had to think on and journal on and contemplate what duty and obligation looks like. So that is that boundaries metaphor that shows up as things like supposed to, should, have to,
could, and all the oods.
Yeah. And we get real sneaky with our shoulds. I do anyway, where I can be like, I've cleaned up from dinner. We're going to go upstairs and watch TV, or I'm going to have a bath or whatever. And I just have I just have to. One sec, I just have to. Sit down at the computer real quick, pay the school fee. Just have to. We all know that once we're logged in and then all of a sudden an email comes in and blah, blah,
oh, yeah.
An hour later, right?
Exactly. We don't know what happened to our time.
Yeah. Really understanding what my relationship is with the duty and obligation has been a huge one for getting out of expectation. Wow. The next one, and something I've been working with more in the last year or 2, is knowing and communicating my own worth. Because if I feel like I'm being taken advantage of, what happens? Whoop, brick wall. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So then there's no opportunity for conversation. There's no opportunity for understanding. There's no opportunity to see, feel, or touch each other.
Yeah.
Because there's a brick wall in between.
Yeah.
So me getting curious about how can I better communicate my own worth?
Yeah.
What are my rates? Let's get real clear on what I'm charging. Let's get real clear on what my experience is that feeds that worth, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Ooh, that's so good. And it's such a good, and it helps you understand, because within everything that all these characteristics, too much of anything can turn into a problem if we don't understand where that line is. So having that understanding about yourself, it's okay, wait a minute, I have to, this helps me show up very loyally, very dependably, and also can cross over into here where I'm not being true to myself anymore. I'm giving myself away endlessly. So it just gives such a great framework to work with. Accepting the layered aspects of ourselves. We've talked a lot about, layers. This is so much a layers piece. So talk to me about your layers journey.
Again, we've kind of already touched on how human design, so many people are just obsessed with that top level, like what is your energy type? And again, they just get that label and hi, my name is manifesting generator. And then that's all they know.
Yeah.
I'm doing this like with actions as though people listening can see. Sorry, audience. But yeah, so again, like there's an aspect of the human design chart called the profile numbers. I really nerd out there a lot. I don't think the words that we use for these profile names or 6 options are very nice. So they are anything from investigator to opportunist, martyr. I don't know about you. I don't have a great relationship with that word.
Me either.
Again, like really digging into that and playing with the words and playing with how that shows up to me has been very helpful. I have learned from working with my profile numbers. I have an investigator martyr. I'm a 1-3. So recognizing that I have a tendency to want to arm myself with so many facts, investigate and research to the point of exhaustion, but I never feel prepared enough. Like, who am I to be the expert? I haven't published a book, blah, 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 whatever that is, right? That I can hide in the background and keep learning, or I can show up and talk about how it's helped me and what I've learned and the research that I've done and how I've alchemized it into my own magic.
Wow. And I think that goes into like, so many times we tend to be over explainers. If I've got enough information, if I've got enough facts, if I've got enough stats, they'll believe me. They'll think I deserve to be here. It can get into that whole like, imposter syndrome piece. I mean, you've given some great examples of where that can feed into that you have to be aware of.
Yeah. And then the adverse of that, the second number, the 3 for me is martyr. Again, I don't have a great relationship with that word. I have a particular person in my life who I would have always considered to be a martyr. What it means to be a martyr is that you learn through trial and error. You're constantly putting yourself through experiences from which you can learn. So sometimes that gets tinged with like, I screwed that up. Yeah. I made a mistake. I didn't follow through. I didn't, whatever, right? So there's like a lot of shame.
Yeah.
Or even like the exhaustion from trying all the time that you won't even engage because you feel like it's going to result in a mistake. Yeah. So bringing those two things together of like, I have to learn, I have to do, I have to make this into something unique for me, and I have to not tinge it with shame. So
spiral within it. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So I actually lead workshops on that, just the profile numbers alone. Yeah. Where we do some like real like creative manipulation with what our profile numbers are and how they show up for us.
Well, so I think a lot of women struggle with these things. Do you find that's the case?
Yeah. So like just the numbers can be any combination of things. So it's always interesting for me to, like, I had a session with somebody the other day and I was like, oh, one of their numbers was heretic. And so then there was quite a huge story around how they should see this heretic energy has shown up throughout their life.
Wow. Right? That's so interesting.
Really, I find there's so much power in those 2 numbers.
Yeah. And I think getting to understand words and their multiple meanings, because they don't always mean what we've been told or think they mean too. There's a lot more to the story so many times.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So really like using human design as a framework for me is part of how I've accepted these. I've come to understand them with a different lens.
Yeah. And that curiosity piece. I mean, I talk a lot about, and people hear me, if they listen regularly, hear me talk about this all the time. Curiosity is a turn I took, and it helps me not to be judgmental. If I start feeling judgmental, I can instead turn on my curiosity mindset, changes the whole way I'm looking at it.
The Ted Lassoism, right? Be curious,
absolutely, 100%. Yeah. And I think that's something to adopt. I mean, about or before that time is when I started, probably about 4 years ago, really started like, okay, there's got to be a way to flip this narrative the way I'm seeing this with myself first and also with other people. And It's that curiosity piece is so important.
Yeah. Well, one of the first things we learn is in coaching training, right, is don't ask closed-ended questions.
Yeah. Stay away from the
right?
yes no's.
Yeah. So if somebody, although in human design, there is a great power for some people in being asked closed-ended questions, but
sure.
If somebody shows up to a coaching session and says, gee, Kristell, I'm feeling really scared about what's happening with my job. Like, I think you're going to downsize. I don't know. And if I said, why do you feel scared? It puts somebody on their heels, right? Of like, why? Yeah. I'm judging you. As opposed to like, how is that fear showing up? Tell me more about that fear. What does that fear have to say to you?
Yeah.
Is way more curiosity questions. So thinking even about how we're engaging with ourselves. Like, God, why are you such an idiot? Why did you make that mistake again? Why did you think you were capable of blah, blah, blah? Okay, like, how could I have handled this better?
Yeah.
What worked? What didn't work? That kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. There's so much power in words and how we frame things. There's so many different ways to ask a similar question, but those words you use determine whether you're going to feel empowered or judged, whether you're going to feel heard, seen, known versus shame and embarrassment. Stopping for a moment and thinking about that, so important with ourselves first, because it's going to be difficult to do it with others if we're not doing that, taking that approach with ourselves first. In Living Out Feel, Finding Empowerment, Embracing Layers, talk to me about how that's affected your relationship with yourself as well as your relationship with others.
Well, we've touched on this and I feel very strongly about it. But if I want something for myself, if that's freedom, let's use that as an example, I better want that for everyone on my street, everyone in my community, everyone in my city, everyone in my country.
Yes.
Right? Again, it's not mine. It's not mine to contain, right? I'm showing up generously. I want freedom for you. I want freedom for me too.
Yeah.
Insert anything there.
Yeah.
So that is one thing that I truly, truly believe in. We've touched a lot along like the embracing layers and really changing the vocabulary with which we speak to ourselves.
Yeah.
I really believe, and part of this comes from my history. I grew up dancing competitively, semi-professionally, and then taught dancing to put myself through university.
Okay.
I really believe part of why I'm on the planet is to change the way people move through the world. Right? So having people embody the things that really matter to them, not just write them down in a journal, like really feel it, really live it, really be it.
Yeah.
So what I find, especially with my coaching clients, is that they're going through some kind of transition. There's some kind of change happening. It's always outside of their control. And they've been so busy in busy work, trying to shove their life in around their work or around other things that maybe don't even matter to them. They don't know how to articulate their priorities because they've forgotten themselves somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
And so now they're trying to figure out like, what now?
Yeah.
What now? Like, what do I do? Right.
Yeah. Where do I even start?
Where do I even start? Yeah. So some of it is just changing the way we move through the world and really prioritizing ourselves first. Because when we show up whole and complete, we can then want that for other people.
Yes. That's where you get rid of the defensiveness, the envy, the hoarding and keeping something to yourself. All those things, when you first are able to do that and feel that and want that for yourself, I think that's such an important thing to remember in all of this and how we show up in the world and how we show up for other people. That all works together, and it starts with you. It starts with you. Absolutely. And you cannot show up generously for others if you don't show up generously for yourself.
Totally.
Yeah.
So what I hear often is like, Kristell, you're so lucky. You're so lucky that you have like the great relationship that you do with your husband, that you've been married for so long, that it's, you're so lucky. Your kids turned out so well. Like, how the heck, I need the parenting manual from you guys. How the heck did but again, like, I'm lighting the way. I'm showing that I'm a priority, that I'm central to this story. I'm not a bit player. I'm not an extra.
Not a bystander.
And if you want to interact with me, these are the things in which I expect.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I think just showing up as wholly and completely as we can. And hoping for that for other people. There is no luck. There is no luck to the fact that my relationship turned out. There is no luck to the fact that my kids are incredible.
You contributed to that. Absolutely. I think that's so important, is the accountability and the contribution and the value, the words, all those things. Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because that does play a factor. We all have a role to play in our own life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, lots of listeners might be like, well, that's great, Kristell. I'm too busy. I have to work. I'm a single mom. Blah, blah, blah. Like, I totally understand, but there's got to be some things that light you up that you can put first.
Yeah. And it doesn't even have to, I think sometimes we get really caught up in time and extravagance. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be that. If it's music that you love, blare that as you're coming home from work or going to pick up the kids from school or going on a 15-minute walk, whatever that is. If it's dancing, dance across your room. I mean, I think we have to also really tap into those things and they can be those simple things that feed us, that light us up, that you talked about earlier, embodying, experiencing, not just writing about. I mean, it's what you can write down. And we'll get to this in a minute. I'm going to ask you about the 5 things that nourish you. Are you engaged in any of those things? Okay, you've recognized that. You've got this list. You've got your menu, yourself going back to the self-care menu. Which one of these things are you engaging in right now? And are you making space for that? And again, it's the intention. So if it's 5 minutes, it's 5 minutes. And that was 5 minutes well spent being lit up and filling yourself. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Well, one of the first things that often shows up in coaching sessions is like, where is your time going? Let's pay attention for a week and see what, because if you're spending an hour a day scrolling your phone, then what could you do on that hour?
There's some time we can get back.
Right? Like, let's reclaim some time and energy.
Yeah,
Stop
absolutely.
giving it away.
Down to our rapid fire, and then I'm going to give you a chance to share how people can follow you, learn about you. All this will be available on our website on embracinglayers.com on the resources page, but I want to give you a chance to share as well. But before that, name 5 activities that nourish you.
Well, one I've touched on already, that's gathering around a table with a group of friends and family to share a great meal. I will always say the song Crowded Table by the Highways.
Yes, that's one of my favorite songs.
That's like my North Star.
Me too.
Right? That's
the first time I heard that song, I was bawling, and I totally connect with that. Yes, love that song.
And as far as a girl band, like, talk about a group of powerful women showing up generously and in their magic.
Absolutely.
So,
my daughter pointed me to them about 4 years ago, and I'm already a Brandy Carlisle fan. Like, that was already a thing.
Me too. Yeah.
And I'm a P&W girl. So I grew up, you're in You're in Calgary. I grew up in the state of Washington. So I think that energy is already kind of, we're born with it a little bit just from that being in that space in the world. But so I was like, got so excited. I'm like, me too. I love that song so much.
Yeah. Spending time with young people, the 2 that I've created, and then their friends, and having like my house full of young people. I love that. But I also am volunteering my time and coaching skills with the youth mentorship program locally. Right?
Yeah.
My morning magic that we've already talked about, that morning magic hour, I use a journal called the Joy Journal by my friend Jillian Shacker. She's based in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
Okay.
She is a joy wizard.
That's
so
awesome.
Everything in that journal is all about like following your joy, and it's quite regimented as far as like Monday's all about manifestation, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday there's lots of gratitude. Friday and Saturday are a bit more like reflective. So I've been following that process since 2020. I want to say 2021.
Okay.
And I also use a tarot deck called Cat Power called Wandering Star as part of my morning journaling process. So I'll pull a card every day, and usually it makes me actually giggle. Like I laugh out loud because it's so bang on for what I need.
Yeah. It's like, that's what I thought today was going to be. All right. Well, and I think also too with that journal, it creating intention.
It is 100% that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the beauty of having, again, like I work for myself, so I have a lot of flexibility in my day, but I can, if, you have to commute or whatever, get up a little bit earlier, give yourself half an hour to journal and reflect and stuff before you start your day. But it becomes quite easy to then use habit stacking on top of that morning magic hour. Like I'm going to move from here and I'm going to go to this activity. And then from there, I'm going to go to that activity. So you can start to implement, but once you got one really well-honed ritual, I would call it, not necessarily a habit, but I'm all about ritualizing habits. One well-honed ritual, you can add on other things that are important to you. If that's your daily walk, if that's you getting on a Peloton, if that's a meditation, if that's getting dressed for work.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Nourishing. Lately, I've been reading a lot of lighthearted fiction. Especially after being in such a cycle of doing like coach training and self-help books and all the stuff that services that. So I jumped on the ACOTAR bandwagon a little bit late, and I've been reading like Emily Henry and just some really like reading for fun. It's been very helpful. Yeah. And just heartfelt conversations with some of my favorite people. And I have like a girlfriend that I meet regularly for tacos, and I go to a women's circle monthly, and just like where it's, it doesn't have to be forever. It's not the longest visit of all time, but it just is like so nourishing and so uplifting. And I always just feel like I come away from those conversations feeling really, like lit up and heart-centered.
Yeah. I love that. Those things are so important. I think sometimes as women, we underestimate the power of those relationships and making sure we make space for those. And you said an important thing, again, that's a time thing. It doesn't have to be a ton of times, but the quality of the time and the intent of the time. Yeah, so good. I love that. All right, 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
Reflective, abundant, easeful, joyful, supported.
Good. Oh, I love that. All right. Kristell, tell people where they can follow you, find you, all those things.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. Just type in Kristell Court, KRISTELLCOURT. You'll find me. My website is my name, KristellCourt.ca. Those would be the easiest ways to get in touch. I'd love to have like DMs from people after they've heard this and let me know if anything landed for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love hearing from people. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. I knew Kristell and I met when I was jumping into Woman Being meeting a while back, and it was just such an encouraging group. And then I learned a little bit more about what she did. And then we had a Zoom call. I'm like, we got to have a conversation. We are so aligned on so many of these things that we care about and talk about. So thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for the work you do in the world, the mentoring of women, the showing up for people, that generous spirit, but doing it with conviction and also honor of yourself and knowing of yourself. I think that's just a powerful combination. Women, I hope you found this empowering today and gave you some tools and things to think about in your own journeys. What lights you up? What's that North Star thing? Where are you making any space for that? Do you need to revisit that? Do you need to look at, do these tools that Kristell has talked about today sound like they could really be helpful and a great resource for you? All that's going to be there in our resources page on our website at embracinglayers.com. But thanks again so much for your time today. I so appreciate this. Women, go out there, be empowered this week. And remember, I think one of my favorite things you said was, if those things you want for yourself, for freedom, that you want it for other people too, that you want it for all of us, that really changes the way we approach the world, especially the world we're in right now. And I think that was so powerful. So thanks so much for sharing that. Audience, we hope you enjoyed this. felt empowered and made you think about your own life, your own approach, how you're interacting and engaging with yourself and others. But take good care of yourselves and have a great week.